Let's get this party started.
When I think of cartoons in the year 2018, one word that immediately comes to mind is all over the place. From one of the biggest reveals in any cartoon ever, to an unexpected new ratings king over at Cartoon Network, to all the new animated series that came out, which either were surprisingly amazing, amazingly surprising, surprising yet not amazing, or amazingly unsurprising. And the movies that came out were no exception. Yeah, we may have had the Peter Rabbit or Sherlock Gnomes here and there, which weren't exactly the heavy hitters, literally no one expected them to be in the first place. And some films I was really excited for years now didn't shape up to the way I would have hoped for them to turn out, but in return we got some sleeper hits that look promising already, but are still sure to shatter any expectations you may have had going into them. Seriously, go watch Into the Spider-Verse, it's really freaking good. Though I could sit here for hours and hours and talk about what I thought about this year in animation in detail and do a complete dissection of everything good and bad, I'm more in the mood to talk about something a bit more positive for now, because in my opinion at least, this year offered some of the best cartoon episodes we got to see in a long time. And I wanted to showcase some of my personal favorites, which are by no means a complete list, but a few recommendations, including shows I've yet to talk about on the channel. The only rule is, it can only be one episode of each series, and I also tried avoiding episodes I've already covered in some way. And upon rewatching, I also changed my mind about some I may have gushed about in the past, but hey, that's just how life is sometimes, isn't it? But now, without further ado, here are my top 10 favorite cartoon episodes of 2018. There was a time before The Simpsons had an episode revolving around Lady Gaga, used any cheap excuse to talk about whatever semi-new technology was out they could, or relied on unfunny meta jokes to tell a story where one twist supposedly destroyed the entire arc of Principal Seymour Skinner. And though I never found said episode nearly as dramatic a twist as Simpsons critics make it out to be, I can understand why an unnecessary twist like this about a character that wasn't even that significant to the show's plot could turn you off. This is exactly why I feel this one set out to be that Simpsons episode done right, with Duke Maloney actually having been a completely different person from who he pretended to be all those years. Granted, he didn't exactly take someone else's identity, but instead made up his own persona to take revenge on Scrooge, but it still effectively changes the very backstory we have come to know about this classic DuckTales villain. Another difference between this episode and Principal and the Pauper is though that it doesn't actually destroy anything of what makes this character interesting, but rather adds on to it, and effectively turns him into an even more mysterious villain that I now cannot wait to see more of this in the seasons to come. The Hurt Soccer from Bob's Burgers. At this point, I'm convinced Bob's Burgers has hit a stride so solid nothing will kick it out of it anytime soon. While I wasn't fully sold on the show in the first few seasons, the show massively grew on me over these past 2 years and in my mind continues to get better and better. One thing I like most about the show is when the family needs to do something they're uncomfortable with at first, only to later grow an appreciation for something they didn't even know they could quote-unquote excel at. It somehow manages to never talk down on its characters and actually makes it feel as though they accomplished something, while in the B-plot also settling an argument between two elderly sisters, which led up to a very sweet conclusion and two of the countless great songs in the series. There's nothing groundbreaking or particularly outstanding about this episode, but it's a good example of how the storytelling in the show only improves over time and makes me feel better about never having been interested in soccer whatsoever. There's also a reference to home movies in this scene, and I may or may not have picked this episode exclusively for that reason. There are some shows out there where I just have to wonder what the reasoning behind them not getting as much recognition as some of the other shows that are being praised in the community is, when it is literally ticking all the boxes for what constitutes as a solid series in the eyes of many. It's got the action-adventure aspect people have been clamoring for, the art style is fairly unique and complements the series' urban vibe fairly well, the character dynamic is well constructed and greatly improves upon the groundwork Big Hero 6 the film laid, but for some reason it suffers the same fate as Tang of the animated series, in that only a select few actually care about it, despite having many qualities to it that elevate it beyond just being a cheap movie tie-in cash grab. This episode not only has one of the funniest baddies in the show, but is also focusing on both Honey Lemon and Go-Go. Their small-scale conflict is cute to see and a nice framework for the rest of what is going on here, which is a bit less action or drama than what we're used to, in return for some of the funniest dialogue in the series yet. It might not serve as the best introduction to this franchise, but as one of the first episodes of the show, it did a great job for me to get acquainted with the overall tone the latter moments in Big Hero 6 will have, even if I wouldn't complain about a little more story and action moving forward. The Curse from Craig of the Creek. One aspect of Cartoon Network's Craig of the Creek I've always found to be more well done than people give it credit for is the chemistry between its three main characters, their growth over the course of the show, and on top of that, all the side characters they introduce over time. Two of these being the witches they meet when trying to find out who used their secret hiding spot. With the continuing success of Steven Universe, it might not be as groundbreaking anymore, but seeing these two lesbian Sabrina-esque sorceresses conduct what Craig assumes to be evil schemes is very cute to see. Though they might take advantage of Craig every so often, it's always in a charming way and never ends up hurting him. Plus, they get their comeuppance too, and in this one, somewhat out of necessity, also follow along with their game. I genuinely love just listening to these two talk about their everyday struggles and plans for the future. They are very realistic portrayals of what somewhat precocious kids at that age can be like, and this episode made me look forward to whenever we see them make an appearance again, which has to account for this episode's quality in some way. Stuck on You from The Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Of all the iterations the Turtles have had over the years, this one I found the easiest to really get into. Maybe it's because of the art style and overall slick design choices, maybe because of the character interactions, which are just as, if not more charming than their 2012 depiction, or maybe because it manages to be a comedy first and foremost that doesn't push the friendship aspect to the wayside. Stuck on You at its core has a simple concept of the Turtles being stuck together and needing to adapt to this new situation, but delivers in having them learn from these new conditions and getting out stronger than ever. This isn't to say the episode was preachy in its morals, only that it laid a great framework for the short 11 minutes that shows just how good the storytelling in this new show can be. Hypnopotamus is one of the new villains from the show I enjoy listening to a lot, and while he isn't much of a threat in this one, adds enough to this episode to not have him feel like an excuse for them to learn something. This is a great introduction to the series and you should check it out. Everybody Loves Lenny from The Loud House. I really don't talk about The Loud House as often on my channel as I should. Yes, this is partially due to Viacom continuing to strike down on the video less than a day after its release and will likely be the reason for why this one's already a re-upload. But it's also because most of the episodes do follow a similar structure that makes it hard to cover them. Lincoln has to face a particular problem with living in a house with so many siblings, finds a solution for said problem, but ends up making things even more difficult for the others. They join forces to combat said problem, the end. That's also why I enjoy far more when they started focusing on different Louds, the parents, and even their neighbors. And that's also why this episode is such a breath of fresh air, because Lenny is only rarely the focal point, which is a shame because she might be the most relatable character on the show alongside Lincoln and maybe their dad, to me at least. I really enjoyed seeing how she tried juggling all her relationships at once and tried to appease everyone's needs, whilst also trying to put her best foot forward with people she isn't that familiar with yet. While the moral on here may be a bit on the nose, I feel it will help kids to understand that it's okay to be yourself and still honest with the people that care about you. If you end up offending someone with that, so be it, because those are not the real friends you should be looking for in the first place. You may hear me talk about this episode again should I cover some more of the Loud House episodes in depth, but for now, I'd say give it a shot for your daily dose of wholesomeness. A Single Pair Rolls from Steven Universe. Yes, I know, the episode everyone and their mom and that mom's grandma's neighbor were talking about for literal weeks, of course also has a place on this list. A Single Pair Rolls may not have been an episode that necessarily holds up well isolated on its own, but it's more about everything it stands for. Because whenever you feel like this series has lost its steam and all the hiatuses have killed its reputation as a plot-driven show, it pulls a trump card like this on us and portrays just how capable of keeping you on your toes it can be. All the theories and build-up leading up to this moment were enough to get a lot of people back on board, and yes, was also polarizing enough to drive a few away, but effectively changed our outlook on many of these characters we thought we got to know over the years, and was just surprising enough to either make you go, wait, what? I didn't see that coming, or wait, what? They actually went with that? Depending on if you enjoy the twist here, you may massively enjoy this episode or detesting for ruining an entire character arc, but for me personally, I found the framework around the big reveal and the episode leading up to the event to be massively exciting, and still enjoy going back to this episode for that very reason. I'd say especially people who were turned off by last year's Steven Universe episodes should check out the preceding few along with this one, and see if it might change your outlook on the show, because I for one can't wait to see what direction the show is headed into. Chapter 6 from Final Space. Remember back when BoJack Horseman first came out and everyone assumed it to be this wacky comedy about a washed up actor who only wallows in his own self-pity? Or Gravity Falls, which turned from one of the most wholesome Disney XD shows to you questioning how they even got past the censors? Well, enter Final Space, a show I've yet to talk about on the channel, but rest assured deserves all the praise it has gotten online in my absence. The show does an incredible job at getting you acquainted with these characters and wanting to see them make it back home to the ones they care about, while packing just the right amount of comedy along with it, only to take that final Spaceball club and beat you right over the head with some of the most emotional moments I've seen in animation in quite some time. For the sake of keeping this list mostly spoiler free, I won't say or show much here, but those of you who have seen the episode in question hopefully know exactly what I'm talking about, and what makes this episode in particular so much more heartbreaking than everything else the show has to offer. It's episodes like this that make me all the more excited for what crazy stunts the show will pull off next. Well, speak of the devil, and a voice may appear. There has rarely been a Netflix show that manages to pull me in with each new episode quite like this Radiohead album in show form. Interesting on the outside, crippling depression on the inside. And just like all the seasons of the show so far, season 5 gave it their all to build up to one of the most emotional climaxes you will ever see in animation. In fact, in terms of episode order, the showstopper again is the second to last one together with Time's Arrow, and that's too much, man. Two of the other game-changing episodes of the series towards the end of their respective seasons. Starting to notice a theme here. But the showstopper isn't the episode I want to bring up. No, I want to talk about Free Churro. An amazing display of how BoJack, even in the face of his own mother's death, can't quite seem to let go of his own ego, and in light of all this, finally faces the very trauma his mom caused to his young impressionable mind. Tying this one together perfectly with episodes like Time's Arrow, where we got to learn what his childhood was like and caused his mother to become the broken mess she turned into. Almost any other show would have taken the easy way out and do a recap episode of him going through old photos with his mother and reminiscing on how she wasn't actually as bad as he made her out to be in the past, but instead lets us experience all the thoughts running through his mind along with him, as he literally speaks them out loud at a funeral he wasn't even supposed to attend. It had the perfect mixture of comedy and drama, while giving closure to this very polarizing character we have come to either detest or start to sympathize with, and I couldn't think of a better way to cap off her arc. Hurricane Hell from We Were Bears. As I predicted in my review of this episode back in January, Hurricane Hell quickly grew to become one of my favorite episodes of the series. It sees the return of one of my favorite characters, Professor Lampwick, has got great jokes, an amazing atmosphere, and one of the most touching moments Ice Bear or any of the other bears have ever been involved in. It's a shame it never got the Emmy it was nominated for in favor of Robot Chicken, which I think is illegal in some countries. Crossover Nexus from OKKO. This one had every right to be the amazing crossover event we were all excited for, and in some ways delivered in the sense that we did get to see many characters from shows everyone thought Cartoon Network had already forgot about, but a weak plot and lack of motivation for its main bad guy prevented it from being any more than decent. House in the Woods from Hilda. It's Hilda. What? It's Hilda. I just really love this show. My Leg from SpongeBob. This was another episode I covered back when it first came out, and while my excited for it has somewhat dwindled ever since, I still think it's one of the finer examples of how to center an episode around a joke character without outstaying his welcome. And yet again, Modern Simpsons should take some notes. Dead Kids from South Park. South Park really seems to have learned a lot from weaker seasons past and tries to up the ante with not only having a hashtag encouraging viewers to try and cancel the very show they are supposed to be tuning into, but also doubling down on a societal issue that is far more topical than many of the show's other season premieres. And no, I'm not referring to Black Panther because that film was... Come along with me from Adventure Time, the series finale of Adventure Time. God, even saying that out loud feels wrong. There are few shows I've as deep an affection for as I do for the first 4 or so seasons of Adventure Time, and for the longest time I tried defending it even at its lowest points. While I may not have been as avid a viewer as I once was, I could see the crew trying to expand on topics and character arcs we didn't expect to see any more of, and I could appreciate that. But it also meant that the burden they were putting on its shoulders for its eventual final season got more and more difficult to bear. Plotlines that were the focal point of multiple episodes in the past got pushed pushed to the wayside, and some characters seem to have disappeared from the show entirely. All the while, new ones were introduced all the time, and when it was announced just how soon Cartoon Network would pull the plug, it became clear that in order for them to give a satisfying conclusion to Finn and Jake's adventure, they would have to focus on one big issue and make that the very center of attention, whilst explaining what happened to the other characters on the show some other time in the form of comics. So instead they did the exact opposite and showed us exactly what happened to basically every major character on the show in one of the most tear-jerking montages ever put to film. Or canvas, I guess. And the rest of the episode also delivered on all sorts of fronts. From Bubblegum finally getting the chance to face off against Gumball, a last lemon grab meme template for all enjoyment, just overall really funny jokes, Fern making a return and helping in getting the gang out of danger, and of course us finding out that just a few days later all of this will likely happen yet again. The fun will never end. On a tropical island, where you're all warmed up inside. And there's no dad to eat your friend. While most of the criticism aimed at this episode is still valid, in that the threat this Steven Universe fusion-esque monster poses wasn't nearly as impactful as, say, the Lich would have been, and Finn and Jake really didn't end up helping much in defeating it, I'd say it did a great job nonetheless in tying together all these years of adventure the show provided us with, and even introducing people who didn't keep up with the latest episodes of the show to what had transpired from seasons 5 through 10. It's saying something if, instead of yearning for more or something else entirely, a season finale leaves me 100% satisfied with the end result, and me ready with this chapter of my life to have come to an end. While not objectively perfect in tying together all of what the last seasons have built up to, or one where every last scene is instantly rewatchable, it's a perfectly satisfying season finale in giving us everything Adventure Time stood for over the years. And dare I say, it was even better than Diamonds and Lemons. Now that's a step too far.